To Capitol tonight. So for the past year, no state lawmaker has received more bad press than Senate Majority Leader Pedro Espada Jr. While Democratic leader John Sampson actually publicly supported the Bronx senator, several of his colleagues actively campaigned against him, and most of them, at least privately, hoped he would see defeat at the ballot box. Well, 3 weeks ago, they actually got their wishes. With assistance from labor unions, the Working Families Party, and Democratic donor Bill Samuels, newcomer Gustavo Rivera handily beat Espada in the September 14th primary. The win catapulted the first-time candidate into a role as the poster child for Albany reform. He has now been traveling the state with Samuels in tow in hope of helping other Democrats replicate his success. And Gustavo Rivera is joining me in the studio tonight to talk more about these efforts. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You've been to the Capital Region before.
Many, many times.
Okay, because you worked for Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
Yes, and before that I worked for the Senate Democratic Conference when we were in the minority. Right. And I also been part of the Somos el Futuro Model State Senate program that teaches CUNY and SUNY students about the legislative process. And then they come up here during the Somos el Futuro conference to actually be on the floor of the Senate debating a bill. So I've been coming to the Capital Region for as long as I've been in New York.
Okay, so here's the thing. You have some knowledge about what the minority was like, which
I very
is
much do.
Probably
Yes.
why you are doing what you are doing now in hopes of keeping the Democrats who you are poised to join in the majority.
Absolutely. I worked at the Democratic Conference when we were in the minority, and and most of the work that we did was to make sure we would take the majority. And the reason for that is simple. We know that to be able to deal with the difficult issues of the state of New York, we need a Democratic majority that is stable and trustworthy. That is why we worked as hard as we did to take the majority. And the reason why I'm here today, because it is not necessarily something that I had sought. I was involved in public service, and I knew that I was going to be doing that for the rest of my life. But what happened as I was living in the middle of the Bronx, in the middle of this district for the last 10 years, and working as hard as we did to take the majority, and then seeing what this man, who I call Mr. Past Tense now, what he did, it compelled me to run, and because we need somebody that is actually going to remember who he works for, and that's the problem with Mr. Espada.
Well, now, he actually hasn't called you, you say. He's not
That's
called
correct.
you since he conceded?
I have not spoken to him, no.
And the problem, though, is that he's still in office until January, and there's a possibility that the governor will be bringing the legislature back, and who knows what kind of damage the man could do between now and then. I mean, it's possible that he could vote no on any number of things.
True.
Do you have any feeling about what might happen? Is there any way that I know you're talking, of course, to the leadership and to your soon-to-be colleagues. We should say that the likelihood of you winning is very, very high because of the makeup of the district.
It is the only reason why I'm here and not in my district right this second.
So have you been speaking to the Democrats at all about how you might mitigate the problem of Pedro Espada if, in fact, he stays? And, I mean, he is going to stay if he shows up, actually, at a special session and might do some damage. Well,
if he is true to his pattern over the months that we were campaigning against him, he won't be showing up. He was not around. We interacted maybe 3 times during the campaign. When we were supposed to show up at a place at the same time, he never showed up. So if he's true to his pattern, and I think he will be, he's not going to show up if the governor calls the legislature back.
Okay, so you are now stumping around the state. You're with Bill Samuels, and you were in Rochester last week with Mary Wilmot. She's a challenger to Jim Alisi, the Republican incumbent. Today, you were with Joanne Yepsen and Susan Savage, and they are also challenging Republicans. It's Roy McDonald
and Farley.
And Hugh Farley. So, of course, the Republicans are not thrilled with this, and they've put out a statement. It doesn't attack you specifically, but it attacks Bill Samuels, who spent at least $200,000 and change, maybe as much as $300,000 to help you get elected. So he's public enemy #1. He is, according to the Republicans, an ultra-liberal. He is a New York City multimillionaire, former campaign finance chair. And if he really wanted to clean up Albany, he should start by throwing out the bad apples in the Senate, like Jeff Klein or Kevin Parker, who faces trial for assaulting a reporter. And no one should take anything he says seriously. So what do you say about that?
Well, I'm not sure who wrote that, but I'm not going to take anything he says seriously. 2 bad apples. Hiram Montserrat, who was convicted of assaulting his girlfriend, that was thrown off the Senate and then tried to come back in and then tried to run for assembly, that he's no longer there. Mr. Espada, who is all sorts of accusations currently under investigation by the FBI and the Bronx District Attorney and the Attorney General, doesn't even live in this district. We got rid of him. These are the folks that we really, and these are the folks that stood up and with the Republicans a year ago
well,
to actually
be fair,
flip over
though,
to
the Democrats took them back. So let's be fair about that. These two guys went to the Republicans, yes, that's true, and then the Democrats took them back so they could keep the majority. They had a possibility, even Bill would say it. Bill has said it many times on this show. He thinks that the Democrats should have remained in the minority so at least they could have basically had the high ground when they headed into the election.
Well, I'll tell you this. It is very likely that had I been in the Senate at that point, I would have also advocated to make sure that they didn't come back into the conference. But I was not in the room. I'm not going to, kind of try to be a Monday morning quarterback and say that they probably should have done differently. But they were against a rock and a hard place, and rock and a sword, because espada means sword in Spanish. I'm not sure if you knew that.
I did not know that.
But that's what they found themselves in, and they had to make really tough choices at that point. The reason I'm stomping around the state for different Senate colleagues, for potential Senate colleagues, is because I want to make sure that the Democrats never find themselves in that position again. I can sit across the table from Susan Savage or Joanne Jepsen, who hopefully will join me in the Senate, and not have to worry whether they're going to flip over to the Republicans, whether they're going to try to hold the state hostage. I can talk with them about, we might disagree on issues, but we can certainly talk about how we compromise and get to a better position for the entire state. That's what we need to get to.
You know, the leader, John Sampson, actually spoke very highly of Pedro Espada and supported him, supported all incumbents who were challenged by primary challengers, including, obviously, yourself. So will you support John Sampson if and when the Democrats do return to the majority, and then they would, of course, hold another leadership vote?
I would likely, yes, support John Sampson, yes.
You would?
Yes.
Now, if, in fact, the Democrats do not end up in the majority, would you support John Sampson?
Well, I think all that I'm concerned about right now is November 2nd. And everything that I can do, along with my Democratic colleagues, to make sure that that does not happen. We have come way too far. Yes, there have been growing pains. We have had a very difficult year, a very difficult couple of years in the Democratic majority. But you have to remember, when Bruno was the majority leader, there were things that not even the minority conference couldn't even co-sponsor legislation. The resources that were given to as far as staff and as far as offices were completely unequal. We've passed Rockefeller drug reform. We've passed reform for redistricting that actually counts people that live in that are incarcerated upstate to be counted in their districts. A lot of things have happened in the Democratic conference and the majority. I think we need to go farther than that, and that's why I'm stomping around for different candidates.
You know, there are people upstate who don't agree with two of those things that you just
course.
said. There are a number of people upstate who feel that upstate interests are not being heard anymore. The Republicans, this is a major talking point of theirs. The entire government is dominated by downstate interests. You are from the Bronx. So how can you assure, particularly my viewers, who of course are upstate, that this Democrat-dominated majority from New York City is going to be actually representing them?
This is exactly why we have to elect upstate Democrats. Senator Darrell Albertine, hopefully Joanne Jepsen or Susan Savage. These are folks that I don't agree with on every issue.
But the interests are still, the conference, even if you did elect them, arguably you do. Say you elect Joanne Jepsen, say everybody upstate is successful. Still, the body is controlled mostly by downstate interests. I mean, that's just the reality of the conference and the way it breaks down. The majority of the conference is from New York City, and that drives the agenda.
But we have to have, the way that agendas get worked out for the entire state is that you have voices inside the room that can actually advocate for interests that are across the state. Now, this is the reason, again, why I'm going around the state making sure that these upstate candidates, that upstate voters know that they need somebody who actually represents them. See, the Republicans who are currently in these seats are not representing the voters. They're representing themselves. There are other versions of Espada. I kept telling voters for months, my neighbors, I kept telling them, the main distinction between Mr. Espada and myself is that he's forgotten who he works for. And I believe that the Republicans upstate have forgotten who they work for. If we have Democrats inside the Democratic conference, I need to learn more about upstate. I need to learn more about the communities up here and what are the needs up here. And how are we going to do that if we do not have Democratic members who are upstate members? That's what I think we need.
We shall see. There are some people who think that it's possible that the Senate chamber will deadlock, and or it's possible that it will be, again, a very slim majority either direction. And, of course, we'll find out in just a few weeks. In the meantime, I want to thank you very much for coming to talk to us,
Thank you for having me.
Rivera.